to Coffey Talk, real stories from real people. I'm your host, Kate Coffey-Bacon, and every Monday we'll sit down for honest conversations about successes, failures, and the lessons we learn from both. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk. Welcome back to Coffey Talk. Today, I am chatting with someone whose story beautifully captures what it means to build a life that is both ambitious and grounded. Brittany Burke is a leader. She is a mom and a powerhouse in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Platform community. Through her work, she has shown all of us that career growth and personal growth don't have to compete. They can actually strengthen each other. Brittany, welcome to Coffey Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you have built such an authentic and trusted presence in this space. Before we get into what balance looks like for you today, can you take us back just a bit? So tell us about your journey into Dynamics, how your career began, and what drew you to this community.
So I never anticipated getting here. I went to school for accounting. I got a master's in accounting. I was going to be a CPA like my mother-in-law, and I was going to do taxes, right? That's what I was going to do. But as I was working in AR through grad school, I kind of started to fall in love with software. And then I was challenged shortly after becoming a team lead in accounts receivable. They're like, hey, we're going to get a new system. I'm like, okay, cool. I had no idea what that entailed because we were using something that you hit the F7 key and it did something. And my very first day when I started there, they're like, oh yeah, you have to F7 that. And I'm like, what class did I miss in undergrad? Right. Because I have no idea what this concept is. And it was just what their system did. So I was like, okay, you're getting a new system. You're just going to teach me how to use it, right? No. At first they decided, oh yeah, it's AR, it's standard, right? We can just plug them in and just tell them how to do it. But the organization I was at didn't do things quite the normal way. Right? We could overpay invoices or get overpaid on invoices. It was a whole concept of commission. So it didn't fit the box. So I kind of got pulled into all of these meetings of how do we make it fit? What are the requirements? And somewhere along the lines, they said, hey, you know how to talk technical stuff and the business stuff. So shortly after go live, the IT team tapped me and was like, hey, you should come work on our team. And I kind of laughed it off and I was like, yeah, haha, that's funny. But things just kind of kept going like, hey, you should really join our team. And there were some personal things going on where I was like, you know what, maybe I need to make a change. Maybe I need to see if I can make more money doing that. At the time, I wasn't in it for the money, but I was like, let's just see. We can try it out. I'm sure accounting will always take me back if I fail miserably at this. Like, let's just give it a try. So I jumped over to that team and I immediately fell in love with talking to users, understanding what their pain points were, and then giving them a solution. I'll never forget my first FDD. The developer, who's a dear friend to this day, told me that it was complete garbage. He's like, who taught you how to write an FDD? And I'm like, I did. They sent me a template and didn't tell me much else. So, I just kind of started there and I just continued to grow and try to find any resources that I could. Unfortunately, a lot of the things I was working on, there was no one to mentor me in that organization, and there really wasn't access to going to conferences or going to events to get that training. They weren't offering anything. It was kind of, well, you're smart, you'll figure it out. So, I built a good bit of stuff there, helped them get kind of right-sided after at least slightly bad implementation, and helped get things on track where the business was happy. But unfortunately, that organization wasn't supporting my growth and investing in me the way I thought I should be invested in. And so I had some key allies in the organization, project managers specifically, who said, you know what, you deserve better. You should be able to get the training you need, be able to be respected the way you want. And they actually reached out to some individuals that we had worked with and said, hey, you should bring her on. You should work with her. And it was these people kind of saying, yes, it's a big leap of faith, but you need to take it because I promise you it's going to be worth it. I was so terrified. I had what was he, 3 at the time? I had a 3-year-old at the time. So I was like, I don't really know if I want to make a jump into consulting where I have to travel. I have a 3-year-old. But luckily my husband was super supportive of me taking that leap and staying home. Well, not really staying home. He was still working, but being home at night with our son while I was traveling for 6 months, right? where I was gone Monday through Thursday. And that's where I really started to fall in love with just getting users happy with their system, getting them what they needed, and seeing that positive change. And then, as we all know, the world shut down in 2020. And so this was all
Mm.
happening right before COVID. So I made this huge career jump in July of 2019, right before the world like caught on fire and we just didn't know what was going to happen. So for 9 months in 2020, I sat on my couch searching for jobs
No.
all day, every day, being told I didn't have enough experience, being told that, my experience at an end user in IT didn't count as consulting. It wasn't valuable. And then one day, and I still don't know to this day how I stumbled upon this job posting for my current company with Coffey Code, where there was no website for the company. It was just one developer who needed some subcontractors. And I said, you know what, I'll apply. They had the LinkedIn apply button, so I didn't have to retype my entire resume over. That's how desperate I was getting, was just if I don't have to type anything, I'm just going to apply to everything. And I got an email shortly thereafter that they really wanted to talk to me. And then within 24 hours, I had a subcontractor contract to do some work, which is now turned into a 5+ year employment. We became full-time employees. So throughout my journey, there was always people that unexpectedly became the advocates and people saying, don't give up. Don't let what somebody sees as a weakness be a weakness, because that's a strength. Those two project managers in my early years who said, you deserve better, you deserve to be invested in,
Mm.
literally forcing me out the door at that organization, saying, like, you need to go. And then, just having people that would be willing to take a chance on me. The owner of the current company that I'm at, he didn't know me from anybody off the street. And he just said, you know what, I have a good feeling about you. And, I like to think that everything happens for a reason. And that, all of the jobs that I was passed up for was because I was not meant to be there. The 9 months that I didn't work was me learning that I can depend on my husband and my family to encourage me to not just settle and to follow my dreams and to feel fulfilled in my job, because now I have a job that I love. I feel fulfilled in it. And it's something that I wake up every morning excited to see what's going to happen during the day.
So, what I have heard already in your story is tons of intention, Brittany, like you going to work and even teaching yourself how to do things that you weren't being taught how to do. I hear a lack of mentorship, and then I hear people that came along and they were like, but this one. And so I hear a lot of intention from you of just being determined. And I hear a lot of purpose. Thank goodness for Coffey Code, for seeing you and all that is in you, because look at you now. Bobby Small and I just had a conversation very similar to this, where he hired someone similar story because he just saw a lot of potential. And I think when we stop looking at the black and white on a resume and start looking at a person for what they bring, for the curiosity that they have, that they can bring to a role, instead of looking at, oh, this experience might not align with what we need. One conversation with you, and I'm like, oh, this one's curious. She wants big things. She's going after big things. I'd hire you today. 100%. I'd hire you today. So let's talk about purpose and what working with purpose means to you. I heard a lot of that in your story. How has that definition changed over time for you as your career has evolved?
Yeah, so my purpose in everything that I do, right, is to make somebody's job easier. Right? I've joked with a few people, and they've said that this completely contradicts consulting, because my job is to teach people not to need me anymore. Which, if you look at consulting, you're like, well, you need people to need you because that's how you build, that's how you make money. But when I can see a user, or even, reach out to a user to say, hey, how are things going? Haven't heard from you in a while. And they're like, everything's great. I know exactly what I'm doing. Remember that problem we ran into 2 years ago? Well, we ran into it again, but you taught me how to fix it, so I didn't need you. And those are the reasons, and that's the purpose that I live for, is knowing that I've empowered somebody to do their job and to do their job better,
Mhm.
and not to constantly be like, I don't know how to do this. I need somebody to help me with it. Because, you know, I was never empowered initially as an end user. And that's kind of where I got my curiosity of, well, maybe IT is better for me because they didn't give me as an end user what I needed. And so not having all the tools in my toolbox as an end user has kind of fueled me into making sure that my users and the people I'm interacting with have their tools and that they can do their job successfully. Anytime I'm speaking, anytime I'm presenting, doing anything, my goal is if there's one person in that room that learns one thing, then all of the hours of preparation and travel and packing and all of it was worth it for that one person to learn one thing. Hopefully it's more than that, but if one person's impacted, it makes it all worth it.
So this show, we're talking about balance, creating the balance between your work world, your home world. And you said something that just like struck me in my most successful job that I've ever had, and that is being a mother. And you said that your job is to teach them to not need you anymore. And as a mother, that's our job. That our job is to teach our children to not need us anymore, which is, when you know the ending, young mothers out there listening, it's going to be okay. But one thing that I really admire about you, and as I read your story a little bit before you came on to Coffee Talk, I admire how you have built a personal brand. It feels so approachable. It feels so real. You just told me a story about pushing your baby around on the expo floor at Community Summit. Like that is balance. I just love it. I can't wait to like hug you in the real. How do you stay grounded while you're building so much visibility in our ecosystem?
I mean, it's my family. I mean, at the end of the day, they're my goal, right? They're my purpose. They're my everything. So, there was a moment at Community Summit where I got a text of a picture of my son pointing to my name on the MVP sign because my husband was walking around with the kids and I was doing the things. And, I want them to see that you don't have to just work, that you can love what you do and you can have passion with it. But I also want them to know that you can have a family and be successful. It's not one or the other. And I feel like too many times and there's a lot of stigma around being a mom and having a baby and having a career where you're kind of out there, where, I'm not just a cog in a wheel that I just do what I do and nobody knows what I do. It was a big leap to kind of start doing a blog and doing everything because it did give me that kind of public persona, but I'm not a polished person. I'm not a perfect person. So when I'm putting stuff together and putting it out there, I'm just like, I can't fake that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say corny jokes. I'm going to, have analogies that don't necessarily make sense to everybody. So, there was one presentation where I busted out laughing because I could not remember. I was trying to make an analogy of something. And I was trying to remember the thing that you get on when you're going onto the plane. You're not in the airport, you're not in the plane. And I couldn't remember that it was the jet bridge.
The jetway?
Jet bridge, jetway. I was calling it a gangway like I was on a cruise ship.
It's fine.
And I just busted out laughing in the middle of my session. And I'm just like, I can't believe like I screwed up that analogy, but it resonated with so many people because they're like, yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And, I just like, I'm like, this is me, whether you like it or not. I'm not going to have one persona that's my, professional one and the one that's, I have to be the real me all the time. Otherwise, I could not keep up with, who's who. Like,
Yeah.
I'm Brittany. You get one of me. So I'm not two people, which would be helpful at times, but, only one person.
I understand all of that so well. I am also not a polished person. I am sometimes very messy and sometimes I say things I shouldn't. And sometimes, like I am as real and authentic in every corner of my life. The only difference between Kate at work and Kate at home, I do like the quiet a whole lot. That's the only difference. Like I'm not any different anywhere that I am. So there's this idea that you can have it all, but not all at once. And that was actually the best piece of advice that I was given as a kid when somebody, when I was saying all these things I wanted to do with my life, somebody was like, you can have everything you want, just not all today. How do you personally define balance? You've said you want your kids to see you as a successful person in you're a successful professional. And when your life feels out of balance, you just had a baby. What helps you to reset?
Sometimes it's just staring at her with those cute little big ol' eyes, you know? It's kind of determining sometimes it's what can I take a step away from what I'm doing at work. You know, it was hard to take a 3-month maternity leave because I was in the middle of one of the most exciting projects of my career. It's one that I was involved in the sales, I was involved in, writing the statement of work and, earning that contract, and it was hard for me to kind of step back and hand it to, two people on the team who I knew could do it, but knowing that I had no input for 3 months. And I knew that I had to take that time. And I think a lot of where I've found balance is not only just focusing on my family and knowing that if I focus on them and work, it'll kind of naturally balance itself out, right? Like my daughter's like on the other side of the wall. Like my husband's holding her, she's there. So I can balance it that way where it's like if I need to take a break and go, snuggle my baby, I can do that. If I'm at a conference and they came with me, I can go up to my room and see my family and do what I need to do. But I think a lot of where I find balance is just being prayerful about it. And, over the last several years, my faith has really, grown, and that I use that to help me kind of stay grounded in, okay, should I do this? And I just pray about it. And if I don't have clarity about it, if I don't have like a good feeling about it, I won't do work things. I won't go to events because I'm just like, you know what, if I'm not meant to be there, if I'm meant to be home, then that's where I'm going to be. I'm always going to put my family first, and I'm so blessed that I do have an employer that encourages that they haven't made me kind of choose between being a mom and working for them. I showed up, you mentioned Community Summit. I showed up at the booth without the baby, and our chief human resources officer goes, "Where's your baby?" He goes, "Go get that baby and come back."
Everybody loved the baby.
I know. He loves her so much. And I was in that moment, I had to pause, and I was like, would every employer be this accepting of it to where the balance is easier? And I feel like a lot of times and a lot of places I've, applied and things like that, in the past, they would have been like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're here, you're on company time.
Yeah.
You can't be walking around with your baby. You have to be doing this, you have to be doing that. But I think I've been able to find a place in this industry that supports the balance. And I think that's a huge part of being able to maintain it. Because if you don't have that company and those leaders around you that help you support it, then it's just a battle. And you're just constantly fighting that battle of balancing it. But when you're told you need to log off and go spend time with your family, you know what? It can wait till Monday. That's where it becomes easier. And it's been, I think, a huge blessing because it's, you have to work on Saturday. It's more or less don't work Saturday.
Yeah.
It can wait. And yeah, there's always that Saturday you have to because it just needs to get done. But more often than not, it can wait. And that's been, I think, the biggest thing I can do to stay balanced between work and life and really just not have to worry if I'm not spending enough time with my kids, if I'm not spending enough time at work. It's kind of naturally balanced, which I feel like is hard to explain, but I feel like it's just because I've surrounded myself with people who make it easy.
And I think that's a call to our leaders and to those of us that are leading to show empathy. You lead yourself with so much empathy. You show up for others. You said like you want to be a mentor to people that might not have had one. You want to model things for your children. You want to be there for your children. So I think that's a call for us as leaders to check in and ask, am I showing up for my team in a way that shows them that I support their balance, their needs for, things outside of work. But I am curious right now in all of the changes that you have been through. And you said that your son is what, 8, 9 now?
And my
He's
daughter
9.
is 4 months.
Yeah. You're doing such a phenomenal job in our ecosystem in showing up for people in huge ways, in leading, again, with that empathy. What does empowerment look like for you right now?
Well, that's a hard question. I feel like it's just a lot of how I feel empowered is when people are just trusting me, and if I say I need help, knowing that it's coming from a place of I've done my homework, I've done my research, this is just outside of my wheelhouse. And I don't think asking for help is a sign of weakness. I honestly see it
Mm-hmm.
as a sign of strength because, we all can't know everything. This ecosystem is I mean, within the past, 20 minutes something has probably changed. Um so, it's knowing that you can ask for help and that people are going to jump in. I mean, the MVP community has been amazing. We have a group chat, and if somebody needs help, yes, we all compete with each other, right? We're pretty much all
Right.
working for competing companies, but we're there helping each other with some of the newer functionality, even older functionality, and I think, empowerment is just having a community or people around you that are going to help you, whether you think it's a dumb question or not. I always say in my sessions, the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask. If you have a question, ask it. It could be the most basic question, but somebody else probably also has it. And so, when I think of empowerment, I just think of just giving people the tools that they need. And, if somebody learns something that they don't have to depend on somebody else for anymore, they're empowered. And once they're empowered, they're going to share it with somebody else. Hey, I
Mm.
figured out how to do this. I figured out how to personalize a workspace. Let me show you how to do it. And then it just becomes this like fire that like spreads because they get excited about it. And some of us get excited about the nerdiest things, like financial period close workspaces. I'm so excited about them. I will shout about them from the rooftop if I can. But, I showed it to one person and then I heard them tell somebody, oh my gosh, you have to check this out, and you just see the excitement spread. And that's empowering because it's people that are then becoming invested in how they're working. And it's not just a tool that they have to use, it's a tool that they want to use. And I feel like when you kind of start to have that mentality change, that's empowering because then you're invested in continuously learning and you don't stay stagnant. And that's, I think, where a lot of people end up is you stay stagnant and you don't look at what's new to help improve you.
Yeah.
And then you're not empowered because you're not learning.
Right.
And I think that learning is, I think there's like a Schoolhouse Rock song about this, probably, but
Probably.
power and learning is how we all grow and that's how we all do our jobs better and more efficient. I don't necessarily think we have to do better at things. I think we just need to be more efficient. But life is about learning, right? I think I learn something every day and it's, whether it's a new recipe, a new software thing, a new thing about being a mom that I thought I knew that I don't know, we learn something every day. And if we stop trying to learn something, we just, what is the point?
Right.
We should always strive to learn.
So as we wrap up, man, this episode went by fast, didn't it? As we wrap up, a couple of my takeaways from you today have been um, watching or hearing the way that you have evolved over time in your balance, and it's not a finish line. It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm that you find day in, day out. And here's this, you just said it. This is one of my biggest takeaways today is empowerment multiplies when you share it. So when you teach someone, it just becomes, one person to another to another. That's what I'm kind of talking about, like being an infectious person and sharing that knowledge on and watching it spread. So thank you. Brittany, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone trying to grow a career without losing themselves in the process?
That's hard. You had said something that you had learned early about you can have it all, just not all at the same time.
Mm.
I might argue that you can. When I decided to have another kid, obviously, 8+ years later, I was terrified. I was like, how am I going to continue to contribute to the community, speak at conferences? My husband gave things up to encourage me to land my dream job. And now I'm able to return that to him because I was able to get to a position where he could take a step back and follow his dreams because he
Mhm.
allowed me to follow mine. And I do think I have it all at once.
Mhm.
I have, two beautiful children. I have a husband who literally stays at home and watches the kids, and he does, work on the side and things like that. I've been able to get renewed as MVP again, and then I earned Fast Track Recognized Solution Architect this year. I did all of that and then some, and I don't think you should try to limit yourself. Yes, pace yourself, of course, but shoot for the moon and you'll land among the stars. And I think if you start to say, I can't do this, or I'll never be able to do this, that's your biggest downfall. Find people that support you, find people that will encourage you, and, find your people. I feel like that's a huge thing I've always kind of seen in the past is like, find your people, find your tribe, however you want to classify it, and surround yourself with the people that are going to say, how can I help you? What can I do to help you reach your goals? I know people that can help you reach your goals, because I feel like if you have that community around you, and I feel like, the D365 community, there's a lot of us around that'll be those people to lift you up and say, yes, you can, and celebrate alongside of you. You can have all of it if you just figure out how to balance it, right? Obviously, we've talked a lot about that. I feel like if you can figure out how to balance the things, you can have all of it at once, but you said earlier, it's not a race, it's just figuring out how to get there and working toward it. And I think, if somebody has one thing to take away is just shoot for the stars.
I love it. Brittany, thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for sharing your perspective. I love your perspective of you can have everything all at once. Watch me. I love it. For the listeners, this has been Coffey Talk, real stories told by real people. Take a breath and remember you're building something that's meant to fit your life. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us today on Coffey Talk. A special thanks to my guests for sharing their story and to you, the listener, for being a part of this conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a Monday morning chat. Until next time, I'm Kate Coffey-Bacon, and this has been Coffey Talk.